Hi, welcome back to the channel. I'm Michelle, and today I want to share with you my homeschooling red flags. So these are things I find concerning, and these are very personal to me. My red flags might not be your red flags, but I wanted to share things that I have found concerning, whether it be in homeschooling curriculum, homeschooling I've seen in general, online, social media, things I've seen in that environment, things that are concerning to me. So the first red flag I've noticed is homeschoolers, and this is mainly online, I've seen this, homeschoolers that have been cramming a big chunk of curriculum into a condensed amount of time. So take something that's meant to be 6, 7 months or a year-long curriculum and condensing it into a month or two. I don't think that's the way the curriculum was intended to be used, and I think we're getting into the habit where people have a plan, they don't implement that plan very well, or they don't stay on track, and they reach the middle or the end of the year and they realize, uh-oh, we didn't do a lot of the things we were supposed to, so they try to condense it or cram it into a short amount of time. And everything I've read about cognitive development, how the brain works, memory, working memory, I've done a lot of reading into that for my 7-year-old who has ADHD. I've learned a lot about how the brain retains information and retrieval practice, things like that. And cramming information, although they might know it for that short amount of time, long term, it's not going to benefit them. Kids need time to process information. They need time to understand it. And if you're throwing them a lot of information just to get through it, I think you're doing a disservice to your kid. I think you need to read how the teacher guides are supposed to be used, how the curriculum is intended to be used. Does that mean I don't think you can make changes or adapt it? No, but I think you need to understand how it works before you try to implement it, and also be mindful that cramming or with taking things out just because you don't have time to do it because you didn't schedule properly isn't beneficial. That I think it's capable of, or you're capable of doing all these things if you have a plan in place. But I've seen, especially this past homeschool year, so many people condensing and cramming these subjects in, or these curriculum in at the end of the year, and it's really not beneficial. You're not doing any good by bombarding your child's brain with all this information just so you can get done, or just so you can move on to the next thing. The point of homeschooling is that we're supposed to go at the pace of the child, and if you as the parent or the educator aren't setting that pace and being consistent with that pace, and then you're like, uh-oh, I didn't do my job, so now I got to cram it in my kid, that's not beneficial. That is a red flag to me. Number 2 is neutral curriculum. So I know there are some people who are faith-based that are completely fine with neutral curriculum. I am a faith-based person. I am a Christian, specifically Lutheran, specifically ELCA denomination, if you want to know. I do treat my homeschooling and my religion in separate places. I know there's some debate on if that's possible. I know there are some secular people that are completely fine using neutral curriculum. I have a firm line. I do not use neutral curriculum. I use secular curriculum in my homeschool, and that is a choice. And I think it's really important, especially when we're looking at things like science, that when we're presenting the ideas that everything should be treated as a fact, I don't think that's doing benefit to our children. I think that's how we lean into these adults believe in conspiracy theories and crazy things. I think weighting the difference between fact and faith is really important, and understanding the difference between those things. I'm not saying they both can't hold value, but I'm not going to change factual science to fit into a bubble of what a specific faith says it should be. And that's usually, more conservative faith backgrounds are trying to twist science to fit into a very literal interpretation. And that's just not how I am, and that's not what I do. So I avoid neutral curriculum. That's one of the things that it often is crossed off my list pretty quickly if it's neutral. And same with secular people. I don't think they understand you can't just remove scripture from a curriculum and it be secular. That there are absolutely agendas in faith-based curriculum. There's absolutely information that's left out And I don't think that's how you should be teaching, especially if it's a subject you're not really familiar with. So for example, science. I don't have a background or degree in science, so it's very easy for me not to notice the nuances or the changes within the curriculum itself that lend itself to this idea of more faith-based than factual information. And actually, I've listened to the Blair and Amy podcast. I'll link that down below. And again, I know some people are like, see, homeschoolers, they're so rough, but I really do appreciate that Facebook and that group have a firm line of what they allow. And I know I can go there and find actual secular resources and not muddle about faith, because I do think people have a right to know the organizations they're supporting, even if they're not faith-based, what's behind that, the agendas behind that. A lot of the faith-based curriculums I can't touch because of their stance on LGBTQ plus community. I absolutely refuse to support companies or curriculums that are discriminating against certain groups of people. So I think there needs to be some upfront honesty with these curriculum companies. And I think neutral is just a way for people to get, the funds, state funds for things like that. But be mindful when you're looking at curriculum and it says it's neutral, that you may not know what's being left out and you may not recognize what agenda or perspective is being pushed. That's why I ultimately avoid neutral curriculum and faith-based curriculum, and why it's a red flag for me when I see it in a curriculum. Number 3, unprofessional homeschooling resources. Now, this is just a personal preference. I don't like when homeschooling resources talk to you on a very personal level, like homeschool mamas and things like that in my curriculum. I don't like that. I want what I'm reading to be professional and academic, and not like someone wrote it in 20 minutes on their computer while their kids took a nap. And that's not to knock the people to do that. I want more academically focused resources. I don't want to sound like I'm reading it from a blog or Pinterest. I want it to sound like it's created by someone who knows what they're talking about and has the background in order to professionally talk about it. Number 4, which leads into that, credentials. The credentials of the person writing the curriculum or the resources I'm using is really important. I look at their background, their experience. Are they someone who knows what they're talking about? I think there's a lot of information out there in homeschooling environment. In fact, you can even get, ChatGPT to write your homeschooling curriculum. That's concerning. That is concerning, and something you should be aware of, that what gives this person, how do they know what they're talking about? That's something I always search at, is looking at the background of the person, the experience of the person, before I implement it, because it is important to me. And if there's a lack of credentials or they don't seem to have a lot of experience or education in the area, I'm not going to use that resource. Number 5, constantly changing curriculum. This is both what I've seen in my real life homeschooling and online. People are constantly changing curriculum. And I know we all have those floundering time when we first start out, we're trying things, we don't really have our own identity as a homeschooler. That's okay to flounder. But when you're constantly following or taking advice from people who are knee-jerking, changing curriculums, there's no reason a person should be trying 6 different language arts curriculum in a year, bar it be your child has significant learning disabilities or something on that spectrum. There is no reason you should be trying 6 different maths in a year. You're not benefiting your child by going from curriculum to curriculum. There's no magical curriculum. I'll break that bubble right now. There's no magic fit. The magic fit is you as the educator being able to take the resources in front of you and teach to the specific child you have. That's part of teaching. I feel like sometimes homeschoolers forget that there's a large amount of teaching involved in homeschooling. There's a lot of direct instruction that needs to happen, and that means you need resources, especially like me in science and history, where I don't have a strong background in, that I can pull from resources that are really good and be able to translate that to my child using curriculum as a tool. So now the next one would be 6, which is trendy curriculum. I find trendy curriculum to be a big red flag. 4 years ago, it was the Good and Beautiful. Everybody loved that. And then everybody, jumped ship on it and said it was crap. And now everybody's saying it's good again. So I don't trust trendy curriculum. I know right now, I think Moving Beyond the Page is really trendy, Guest Hollow is really trendy. I've seen a bunch of those videos pop up. I've looked into both of those programs. I haven't been impressed with either of those companies or programs, so I'm not sure why they're so popular. This isn't to knock it if you use it, but I'm saying when you're seeing these more trendy curriculums, do your own research. Try not to let the bias of another person influence your decision on whether or not to use that curriculum. Look at the curriculum for what it is, the credentials of the person. Is it something you can actually utilize? Is it something you're actually going to use? Will it fit into your schedule? Be realistic about the expectations you have, and not just because, all these people are using it means you have to use it, or it's even good. Just because a bunch of people are using it doesn't mean it's a good curriculum. I feel like that really needs to be said. Just because it's popular doesn't mean it's of quality. Next one is, I don't like when people, it's not that I'm against sponsored content on YouTube. I personally choose not to do that path. It's just not something I'm comfortable with. But when you see people using sponsored curriculum or content and never using it again in their homeschool, I feel like this is a misuse of your influence, that you're presenting curriculum just for the paycheck. And I think that's kind of taking advantage of people. And I think there's a lot of people that watch these videos that are vulnerable, that are looking for answers. And it's easy to see us on this little platform so confident and sure of ourselves and think, well, they have it together, so I'll just use what they have. It's not. Sometimes I think there's an abuse of the power and influence that comes with online social media. And this is one of them. If you see them talking about a curriculum, but you never once see them using it in their homeschool, or it never comes out again, don't trust it. Don't believe it. Next one is 8. So I don't like resources that don't cite I don't like curriculum and resources that don't have a bibliography or a resource list. Where did they get the information? So for example, Core Knowledge has an extensive resource list that I really enjoy having that. History, science. I mean, we do Core Knowledge for that, so that kind of fills into that. But I'm looking for where the person got this information. And there are so many resources, homeschooling resources I've come across that have absolutely no resources cited. And it's like, well, where did you get that information? Especially with things like science. If I want to verify that that's an actual fact, I need to know where you got that fact. So a red flag for me is when sources aren't cited. Next one would be homeschoolers that are critical of the public school, but not critical of the homeschooling environment. I do think there's flaws in public school and there's system-wide issues going on, absolutely. But there's also a lot of things wrong in homeschooling too. There's a lot of abuse and neglect. I'm not just talking about physical abuse, although I think that is a component that should be talked about. Educational neglect is huge. I've seen educational neglect both in real life with homeschoolers I know, and educational neglect on this platform. I've seen people who have done almost absolutely nothing the entire year. And I can understand if you have a family crisis, you have a health crisis going on, something that drastically changes your life happens. That, of course, will impact your homeschool. But if it's just because you couldn't get it done, or you didn't have the motivation, or time got away from you, that's on you, and that's not right. I've definitely seen situations where I don't think this child is benefiting from this homeschool environment, and so many times it seems like homeschooling is more about the parent and what they want and what they need, and homeschooling is for the child in front of you. It's exactly what's best for them, and that might not be you, and that's okay. But I think this idea that it's okay to critique and talk about the public school in a negative sense, but no one's coming on this platform and talking about the pitfalls of homeschooling and the ramifications and long-term effects. I mean, you can see online there, I will link a website down below that talks about different homeschoolers' experiences, and they're advocating for rights of children. Because again, I'm one of those person that I believe children absolutely have rights outside of their parents, that parents that the children have a right to an education. That education should be a well-rounded education, not just some condensed, warped version of what the parent thinks the world is. So I will link that website down below because it talks about different steps and advocacy for that and the rights of children, because I really do think that's important. But I find it a red flag when someone talks really negatively or says something snide about the public school environment, but doesn't want to talk about anything negative about the homeschooling environment. And the last one is a red flag for me is curriculum or homeschoolers that push for independence too soon. Now, I think independence is something that we should be working towards, especially in the middle school and high school years. But this is not something you just lay in the lap of your child that, oh, you're in 5th grade now, guess what? You're going to, do your language arts independently. No, I think it's something that needs to be scaffolded over years, even in the young years when they can do simple things like handwriting practice without you slowly building up to that. And luckily, we've used a lot of curriculum that I think has naturally scaffolded that independence. One of them being Lightning Lancer. My oldest does Lightning Lancer. She did it from 3rd grade. She's now in 6th grade. It slowly builds up to more independence, and it even starts being written towards the child in 5th and 6th grade. Now, does that mean your child is absolutely ready for independence in those? No. Curriculum, just because it says it's independent doesn't mean your child's ready. And I've definitely seen it on the other end where I've seen parents push for independence for various reasons, whether it be, you have a bunch of kids and you have a lot of balls to juggle and a lot of different areas that you need to teach, that it's hard, that it's easier for you to push that independence for your child. But again, I don't think we're doing that individualized education we're aiming for if that's what we're doing. If the only reason we're pushing this particular resource or curriculum is because we're not needed for it, are we really providing that individualized education? And I get it. I have kids, there's 8 years between my oldest and youngest, that it's hard to juggle those multiple levels, but it's also the responsibility I took on when I decided to educate them. And that's why I'm not a big fan of, language arts and math in group subject form, because there's a lot difference between what my 11-year-old can do. And I think when you try to do family style, I get the convenience of it, I do. But I also think you do sometimes do a disservice to your child when you're not allowing them to have age appropriate, or at least where they are level-wise, or dumbing it down or bringing it up. It just, individualized education is the hope of homeschooling. And I think when you take away from that because of outside influences or things going on, it makes it harder, because like I said, I think there's a lot of direct instruction that needs to happen in homeschooling, even in the middle school and high school years. It's not like my daughter is going to be in 8th grade and suddenly she's not going to need me to, and I'm going to be more than just a facilitator, make sure you're watching this video type thing. It's direct instruction. High school, they need direct instruction. It's not just read this workbook or read this literature book and annotate it. They need instruction. Part of homeschooling is teaching, and that needs to continue on. And though I do think a level of independence can be reached, you are still the teacher. You're still supposed to provide direct instruction. And I think when you push independence too early, or you haven't scaffolded it or prepared your child for independence, you're not being beneficial to them. You're putting more pressure on them. There's no reason a 4th grader should have complete control of their education. I think that's way beyond what is developmentally appropriate for that age. It's putting way too much pressure, and then to blame your child for when they don't finish something. It's you, the teacher. You need to provide the education. So those are my 10 red flags I've been thinking about lately. If there's any red flags you have in homeschooling, whether it be, online or curriculum, I'd love to hear them. What are your red flags? Again, these are very personal to each person, so I expect red flags will be different for everybody. If you have any questions about anything I talked about, leave them in the comments below. If not, thank you for watching.